This is a CBS News special report on this Easter Monday, the death of Pope Francis. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York. We are reflecting on the life and the legacy after the Vatican announced just 2 hours ago that Pope Francis died this morning. Francis had appeared in public less than 24 hours earlier, blessing a thrilled Easter Sunday crowd in St. Peter's Square. 88 years old, the Pope was, of course, recovering from a case of double pneumonia that put him in the hospital for more than a month. In a moment, we're going to talk to Chris Livesay, who is live in Rome. But first, Nora O'Donnell, who we're lucky to have here. She interviewed Francis at the Vatican almost exactly a year ago. Nora, good morning. Your reactions.
Yeah, good morning to you, Tony. That's right. You know, he was called the People's Pope. And remarkable to wake up this morning and realize he has passed on this Easter Monday. You know, Pope Francis led the Roman Catholic Church for more than 12 years. Throughout that time, I guess you could consider his papacy as someone who reached out to groups that have been overlooked, marginalized throughout the church history. And this was just one way his papacy set a strikingly different tone.
The Holy Father set the tone with his first official act as Pope, reversing a centuries-old tradition. I want to ask you a favor, he said. Before the bishop blesses the people, I ask that you would pray to the Lord to bless me. He named himself after Francis of Assisi, a saint known for his simplicity and humility. The first pope to hail from the Americas, the first Jesuit pope said he wanted a poorer church, one that would include the excluded, rather than living in the lavish papal apartments where popes have lived for hundreds of years. He set an example by choosing to live at the Santa Marta, a simple guest house on Vatican grounds.
What an honor.
That's where we met him in April 2024. His desire to reach out to ordinary people sent the bulletproof Pope-mobiles into storage. I cannot greet people from inside a sardine can, Francis famously explained, even if it is made of glass. He'd become one of the most popular public figures in the world, regularly speaking up for the voiceless, especially migrants and refugees. During his papacy, he was faced with a wave of clerical sex abuse scandals that stretched to the very highest levels of the church. He was accused at first of being tone deaf in his slow response to the crisis. But then, in 2019, the Pope made sweeping changes to allow for greater accountability and transparency and abolish the top-level confidentiality of pontifical secret.
You have said zero tolerance.
It cannot be tolerated. When there is a case of a religious man or woman who abuses, the full force of the law falls upon them. In this, there has been a great deal of progress.
A few weeks after we interviewed Francis, it was reported that he used a homophobic slur in 2 private meetings. But in his more than a decade as Pope, he voiced support for bringing the LGBTQ community into the church. That push started aboard a papal flight just months into his tenure. Who am I to judge, he said. Hailing from South America, Pope Francis's simple style was a product of his humble beginnings. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was born in 1936 in Buenos Aires to an immigrant Italian railway worker and a housewife. As a young man, he lost part of a lung to an infection. He was ordained at the late age of 32. Francis claimed he only brought a small bag to the conclave that elected him because he expected to be going back home to Argentina.
Do you like when you are called the People's Pope?
El Papa de la gente.
Instead, he became one of the oldest popes in history, having traveled to more than 60 countries and keeping a busy schedule until the final days of his life.
What do you hope your legacy is?
I never really thought about it. The church is the legacy. The church not only through the Pope, but through you, through every Christian, through everyone. Personally, I get on the bandwagon of the church and its legacy for all.
You mean that the church is for everybody?
Yes, for everybody.
And as you can see there, Tony, in our conversation, which was more than about an hour long, his warmth, his conviction, the historic nature of his papacy, as we explained, because not only was he the first Jesuit Pope, the first Pope from the Americas, the first to choose the name Francis, as I pointed out there, because he wanted to bring a focus to the poor. And that's why he lived so simply in Casa Santa Marta, which is where we did that interview. Now, as what his legacy will be, we asked him about that in our interview, and he said he hadn't thought much about it. He hopes the legacy is the church, in his words. But I think in many of the papal scholars that we have spoken to recently and just over a year ago, they noted that he had changed the tune, but not the lyrics of the church. Do you understand what I mean? In other words, a lot of church doctrine did not change, but he did try to make the Catholic Church more inclusive, whether it was his message about gays or same-sex unions to, well, he is not allowing women to become priests or deacons. He did appoint two women to high offices within the Vatican, managerial offices. That is a step forward. And then just one other thing that I thought was really noteworthy, too, that I learned, Tony, spending time with him, is now in St. Peter's Square, where we saw tens of thousands of people yesterday gather to celebrate Easter. There are now showers for the homeless. They can also receive medical care there. And that was part of Francis's outreach, to make sure that the Catholic Church and the world focuses on the poorest of the poor.
Yeah, Nora, it's so great to have you here. 1 year ago, you were in conversation with the Pope, the first extensive, wide-ranging interview that the Pope had with an American broadcast journalist, you being that journalist. One of my favorite anecdotes that I've come across this morning, something that's going around, is a story of the Pope as he tells his mother back in the 1960s that he wants to go into the priesthood, and she says, please, I would suggest you study medicine instead. And he tells her, as the story goes, I'm studying the medicine of the soul. And then in his role as Pope, medicine, it would seem, for the church as well, those changes to refocus the church on different parts of the Catholic experience. Sometimes it was something that cheered liberals and distressed more conservative members of the church. But as you point out, there was a change in the tune, but not in the doctrine. And I think that continues, as I understand it, in the plans now for the Pope's funeral. He won't be buried at St. Peter's. What do we know about his plans and what's next?
That's right. I mean, a couple of things. That's right. I mean, he studied to be a chemist and then, of course, was a Jesuit. And that's different. And as we talk about how the church may or may not have changed, we should note that as the conclave will commence in some 15 to 20 days from now to choose a new pope, Pope Francis put in place 110 cardinals of the 138 or so that will vote for the next pope. So that is a big influence he has had on the church, even though he has not changed essentially much of the doctrine. So I think that's worth noting as well. And then what was your other question, Tony, about Pope Francis?
What do we know? He's not going to be buried in St. Peter's. We know there were changes to the way he was announced as Pope. I love the way your obituary began with the fact that he was blessed by the people before he then blessed the people in turn. It's such a beautiful way to announce himself to the world. So, yes, go on.
On that note, what we do know, which is really interesting, he is going to be buried at the Church of St. Mary Major, not inside the Vatican, which is highly unusual. This is the church where he will be buried is the largest Marian church in all of Rome. I was just there a couple of weeks ago. It is actually the church where Pope Francis goes to pray before and after every single international trip that he does. So he has been there more than 100 times. And the reason, it's a really beautiful church. And the reason that he goes there, once again, is to bring the focus to Mary, the Blessed Virgin Mother. This is a picture of him there praying right before this really beautiful picture of the Virgin Mary. And so he will be buried there. And again, I think it's just, like you said, how the Pope has tried to do things differently, to break with the centuries-old tradition of the Roman Catholic Church and to bring attention, whether it is to the marginalized and the poor, or in this case where he will be buried, to Mary.
Yeah.
A saint that he, of course, and the Blessed Virgin Mother, and to bring attention to her teachings and what she represents for the Catholic Church.
You know, it's an amazing thing, as you pointed out, a pope of firsts in his life and now a pope of firsts in his death as well. We have Chris Livesay in Vatican City for us. Chris, where are you? What's the mood there? What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Good morning, Tony. Well, I am overlooking St. Peter's Square just behind me, and you'll hear gongs of the bell. Each one of those gongs represents 1 year of Pope Francis's life. He died, of course, at the age of 88, so we will hear 88 gongs throughout this morning. Apart from those gongs, they really pierce a deafening silence that has laid over St. Peter's Square ever since the news broke this morning, just before 10 a.m. local time, that Pope Francis had died. And that silence really stood out in stark contrast to the scenes we witnessed yesterday here in St. Peter's Square. Pope Francis taking a victory lap of sorts through St. Peter's Square in the Pope Mobile for the very first time since he was discharged from the hospital 3 weeks ago. You can hear him struggling to say, "Happy Easter, brothers and sisters." All of this, we should mention, in defiance of doctor's orders. Now, he was told to stay home and rest and avoid mingling with the public for at least 2 months, but those doctor's orders proved to be too much for the Pope during Holy Week, the holiest week of the year, and of course on Easter Sunday, which really capped off a string of surprise appearances that Pope Francis made. On one example, he just sort of popped up in St. Peter's Basilica behind me, wasn't wearing his zucchetto, that's the head covering of the Pope. He was wearing black pants, so not the papal white, and he had a poncho covering his shoulders as he was wheeled around beside a tomb. So he didn't even look like a pope. It really struck people just how normal and down to earth he appeared. Then about a week ago on Palm Sunday, he made another surprise appearance, mingling with about 20,000 people here in St. Peter's Square. On Thursday, Holy Thursday, he made a surprise appearance at a prison where he kissed hands of many of the prisoners and they kissed his. About 70 inmates there. Again, all of this unscripted, unplanned, and it turned out to be just a drum roll, a sort of dress rehearsal for that comeback appearance, as it were, on Easter, which also turned out to be his last appearance, Tony.
Chris Livesay for us. Chris, thank you very much. Nora O'Donnell reporting as well with an obituary there, remarking the passing and reflecting on the life of Pope Francis, age 88, 12 years as Pope, at times to cheers from more liberal members of the church and much distress for conservative members of the church. But as Nora points out, while he changed the tune of the church, he did not change the doctrine. And now we look to what happens next. For much more coverage, you should stay on this channel, 7 a.m. A special edition of CBS Mornings will follow. You may remember the Pope was in the hospital for more than a month with double pneumonia. So while this is, of course, a shock, it is also at the same time not a shock. We will cover it extensively in the hours ahead. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Tony DeCopel in New York.
You've been watching special coverage of the death of Pope Francis, and we are getting reaction here at home.
Christina Fan joins us live from St. Patrick's Cathedral, where Mass will begin at 7 this morning. Christina.
Well, Mary and Chris, as we all know, here at St. Patrick's Cathedral, parishioners and New Yorkers have been praying for the Pope's recovery ever since he was hospitalized a couple weeks ago, earlier this year. And for many, his passing is really a great loss for humanity. He is being remembered today as the People's Pope, a man who always led with humility and compassion, who preached about world peace. Tributes, of course, are pouring in from all across the world, from political leaders, including the Dutch Prime Minister, who called Pope Francis a man of the people. French President Emmanuel Macron described him as being on the side of the most vulnerable and the most fragile, and fought for more justice. Vice President J.D. Vance, who just visited the Vatican the day prior, wrote, quote, "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him." Francis traveled to over 60 countries during his time as Pope and drew crowds who were not just made up of Catholics who admired him for his compassion, his humility, his advocacy. He led by example, his supporters say, from dining with the homeless to washing inmates' feet to providing a home in Italy for migrants and refugees fleeing war. Cardinal Timothy Dolan recently reflected on the Pope's accomplishments, calling him a man of the heart who reminds people of the importance of tenderness, love, mercy, and above all, forgiveness. The first Mass, as you guys mentioned this morning at St. Pat's, will be at 7 a.m., and that will be led by Cardinal Dolan. We, of course, expect him to address the Pope's passing, and he will be available to say a few remarks to reporters, we're told, after, again, that 7 a.m. Mass, the first of the day. Reporting live from Midtown, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
All right, Christina, thank you. That Mass coming up at St. Pat's in about 40 minutes. Joining us now is Father Thomas Reese. He's a senior analyst at the Religion News Service. Father, thank you for being with us here this morning. As a Jesuit priest yourself, what was your reaction to today?
Well, I'm very sad, of course, because Pope Francis was such a wonderful person, a wonderful priest, a wonderful Pope. He really projected Jesus, which is what we want in the Catholic Church. I mean, for so many years, we were just nagging people, we were condemning people, and here was someone who came like Jesus and with compassion and love for sinners, for the marginalized, for the poor. He was the kind of Pope that you really wanted to get to know and get close to. And I think people saw that. I mean, 75% of American Catholics had a favorable view of Pope Francis. I mean, people in Washington would kill for those kinds of numbers. Even 63% of Republicans who, you know, I mean, the Pope had a number of fights with Trump, but Republicans still liked him. He was a man that really projected the kind of compassion and love that Jesus brought to the world.
And Father Reese, we understand you plan to travel to Rome for both the funeral and then the conclave. Can you talk to us about what to expect there in the coming days?
Well, the cardinals will gather from all over the world to come for the Pope's funeral and then for the conclave. They will gather together in secret behind locked doors to talk about who they think should be the person to follow Pope Francis, hopefully to continue his mission, continue his legacy, and we'll see what comes out. It can be a surprise. There's no front runners right now.
Father, I want to ask you again about Pope Francis's lasting legacy for the Catholic faith. I know he was seen as a trailblazer in many aspects, but if I could ask you personally, your thoughts.
Well, he did so many wonderful things. The way he reached out and defended migrants, the way he attacked clericalism and called on bishops and priests to stop acting like princes and to listen to their people. The way he brought women into the Vatican as executives and positions of authority. But I think it was his personality, it was the warmth of it that attracted so many people. He was the kind of priest that you wanted as your pastor. You know, when you came to church on Sunday, he was the kind of person you wanted to see in the pulpit and wanted to listen to. So this is the kind of thing I'm thinking about right now, how all of us clergy, I wish we were more like Pope Francis.
Well, Father Thomas Ruiz, we appreciate you taking some time to speak with us today. A difficult day for the Catholic Church as we remember Pope Francis. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
Sure.
And up ahead, our team coverage on Pope Francis continues.
The reaction continuing to pour in from around the world as we remember the Pope's legacy.
Good morning and welcome back, everybody. 6:25 the time. Thanks so much for spending a little time with us here on a Monday morning. And after our warmest weekend of the year, well, we're seeing some of that warmth slip out of our hands today. Temperatures only in the 50s with increasing clouds. But look at this. After our coolest day of the week, we're going into our warmest day of the week tomorrow as temperatures rebound. Then we are cruising into the 70s with a few showers overnight tonight. After that, better rain chance Friday and Saturday. Now for a look at your first alert traffic, let's send it out over to Guy Stanier. Morning, Guy.
Good morning, Tony. Unfortunately, in Queens, we have an accident. 2 lanes are blocked on the southbound side of the Van Wyck. This is right at Atlantic Avenue. Delays are back to the Grand Central Parkway. And we have some subway issues in Manhattan. Uptown A and E trains are running with delays due to a signal malfunction right near West 4th Street, Washington Square. Alternate side parking is in effect today citywide. Chris and Mary, back to you.
Guy, thank you. And ahead in the next half hour, breaking news coverage on the passing of Pope Francis continues.
A live look at Vatican City as we remember his impact on the world.
This is CBS News New York.
Now at 6:30, breaking news on CBS News New York. Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. This after we just saw him yesterday on Easter Sunday in what was a truly remarkable scene at the Vatican.
We are live this morning with how he is being remembered. It is Monday, April 21st. I'm Mary Calvi.
And I'm Chris Rangi. Let's get straight to our breaking news this morning. Catholics around the world mourning the death of Pope Francis.
He died today at the age of 88. Tina Kraus has more on the Pope's life and legacy.
From his first words as Pope,
Fratelli e sorelle, buonasera.
Francis displayed a humble style that earned him the nickname the People's Pope, often wearing plain robes and living in a small apartment at the Vatican. Born in Argentina in 1936, Jorge Bergoglio became a priest in 1969 and Archbishop of Buenos Aires in 1998. He earned another nickname there, the Bishop of the Slums. He rode the bus, cooked his own meals, and preached in the poorest neighborhoods. The Pope's humility was visible during his visit to the U.S. in 2015. He rode in a small car and his Pope-mobile while getting around in Washington, D.C., New York, and Philadelphia.
In the land of the free, at the home of the brave.
The Holy Father made history when he addressed Congress and celebrated Mass with hundreds of thousands of people in Philadelphia. The Pope also brought a message to U.S. Catholics to take care of those less fortunate. On the final day of his trip, he met with victims of sex abuse. In 2019, Pope Francis expelled disgraced former U.S. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick after a Vatican investigation found him guilty of sexually abusing children. He was the most high-profile church figure to be defrocked in modern times.
We ask forgiveness for our sins.
The move came just weeks before nearly 200 senior church leaders met for a landmark Vatican summit to prevent clergy sex abuse.
Nei confronti dei bambini.
Despite the clergy abuse scandal, the Pope worked at making the church more welcoming. He launched a worldwide survey on contraception, premarital sex, and homosexuality. The Pope said gay people should not be marginalized and famously asked, "Who am I to judge?" Francis made history in 2023, leading the funeral of his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI. That same year, he celebrated the first decade of his papacy with the release of his first podcast, or Popecast. In an historic interview with CBS's Nora O'Donnell in 2024, the Pope addressed criticisms of his efforts to revisit teachings and traditions of the Church.
One thing is to take tradition into account, to consider situations from the past. But quite another is to be closed up inside a dogmatic box.
Francis, who had part of his lung removed when he was younger, battled a number of health issues in his later years, including hospitalizations for bronchitis. Supporters will forever remember him as a revolutionary pope, crediting him with choosing service and kindness over the power of the papacy. Tina Kraus, CBS News.
But somehow, with all those health issues, Pope Francis remained active up until his death, including a surprise appearance yesterday for Easter.
Derek Waller is live in the newsroom with how Francis spent his final days. Derek.
Mary, Chris, Pope Francis was not scheduled to take part in that Easter Sunday celebration in St. Peter's Square. A lot of people surprised by this. This happened. Take a look. An enormous crowd of thousands cheered for the 88-year-old pontiff who emerged from his convalescence on that balcony, delivering a blessing in Latin and then later taking a ride in the famous Pope-mobile. His Easter speech appealing for peace in Gaza and Ukraine. Francis had been battling severe health issues in his final months, including a 5-week hospital stay battling pneumonia in both of his lungs, as well as other respiratory issues. Now, at one point, he was said to be in grave condition before making what some would call a miraculous recovery before his release from the hospital on March 23rd. Francis also made a public appearance this past Thursday at a prison in Rome, notably breathing on his own without the supplemental oxygen he had been using. During Holy Week, he has often made it a habit to wash the feet of prisoners. This year, due to his frail condition, he was not able to do that. Still, inmates did kiss his hands, and at one point, he even signed one inmate's Bible. Mary and Chris?
All right, Derek, thank you. Live at our newsroom for us. Tributes to Pope Francis pouring in from the Catholic community and leaders around the world.
Christina Fan joined us live from St. Patrick's Cathedral, where Mass will begin at 7 this morning. Christina.
Well, Mary and Chris, here at St. Patrick's Cathedral, New Yorkers have been praying and hoping for the Pope's recovery ever since he was hospitalized earlier this year. For many, his passing is a great loss for humanity. He is being remembered this morning as the People's Pope, a man who always led with compassion, humility, and was a great spiritual leader. Tributes, as you guys mentioned, of course, are pouring in from all corners of the world, from political leaders reflecting on his tremendous impact. Buckingham Palace put out a statement on behalf of King Charles, writing, "His Holiness will be remembered for his tireless commitment to the common causes of all people of faith." French President Emmanuel Macron described him as being on the side of the most vulnerable and the most fragile. Vice President J.D. Vance, who just visited the Vatican the day before, wrote, "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him." Francis traveled to over 60 countries during his time as Pope and drew crowds who were not just made up of Catholics who admired him for his compassion, his humility, and his advocacy. He always led by example, from dining with the homeless to washing inmates' feet to providing a home in Italy for migrants and refugees fleeing war. Cardinal Timothy Dolan recently reflected on the Pope's accomplishments, calling him a man of the heart who reminds people of the importance of tenderness, love, mercy, and forgiveness. The first Mass today at St. Patrick's is at 7 a.m. and, of course, will be led by Cardinal Dolan. We do expect him to address and talk about the Pope's passing and also greet and give some remarks to reporters, again, right after that 7 a.m. Mass, which is the first of the day. Reporting live from Midtown this morning, Christina Fan, CBS News, New York.
Christina, thank you. And as the world mourns the Pope, Catholic leaders look ahead to the conclave, the process by which Catholic cardinals select the next Pope. The participants are sequestered and forbidden from speaking to anyone outside the process, which can take several days. Only cardinals below the age of 80 have a vote, which they cast in the Sistine Chapel. Rounds of voting continue until one candidate receives a 2/3 supermajority. The crowd waiting outside the Vatican is notified a Pope has been elected when the chimney above the Sistine Chapel billows out white smoke.
Well, it is now 6:37. Coming up, our team coverage on the passing of Pope Francis continues.
Live look again at Vatican City, the worldwide reaction pouring in this morning.
Welcome back. It is 6:40 right now. Time for a check of your first alert forecast. Here's Tony Sadiku. Hi, Tony.
Hey, good morning, Chris. We've got a really nice week ahead, but there's a little pattern change that sets up today, and you'll notice the difference. Checking in with the weather watchers, numbers are dropped. 30s and 40s, a good portion of the area. Just wanted to check in really quick with Ron, who's down the shore, talking about the light sea breeze. He could feel that cool wind blowing in from the water today, but blowing in from the other direction tomorrow. That will make a difference in the numbers. Show you a look outside. We're waking up. Clear to mostly cloudy skies out there right now. We'll call it partly cloudy. 50 with that breeze out of the east-northeast. Look at this, though. Temperature trend all over the place. Something we've gotten used to, but it's been a steep drop-off since the mid-80s we had on Saturday, enough that I don't know about you, but I was cranking the AC for the first time this year. 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s today before we start to bounce back up tomorrow. Right now, though, big difference when you step outside. It's a cool, crisp feel with numbers in the 30s, 40s, and 50s out the door. There are no major issues coming and going. Go green lights. It's a tranquil trip out there, but hey, be mindful while the temperatures are down. It's not the pollen. The tree pollen's still up there. Oak, birch, and maple, the primary culprits for that. So is there any rain that can help us out there? Well, not so fast. We've got a high pressure in charge. So the atmosphere is stable today, even though we've got increasing clouds. We will watch for a passing shower to arrive late tonight. It is not a big disruption, though. I think it's mainly dry by morning. Temperatures are climbing. We're back in business, back to back to back to back 70s into the weekend, too. It does look like rain could make a comeback Friday into Saturday of next week. 6:42. We'll send it back to me right now.
Good morning, Tony. We're going to start in Queens. We have a crash. 2 lanes are blocked on the southbound side of the Van Wyck at Atlantic Avenue. Delays are back to the Grand Central Parkway. In Newark, we have a crash. 1 lane is closed on the outbound side of the Pulaski Skyway on the Newark side. Delays are across the westbound span. We still have some subway issues in Manhattan. Uptown A and E trains are running with delays due to a signal malfunction right near West 4th Street, Washington Square. And a live look outside at the Lincoln Tunnel. No delays down around the Helix through the Toll Plaza. The Holland Tunnel and the George Washington Bridge are also moving well. Alternate side parking is in effect today citywide. Chris and Mary, back to you.
Guy, thank you. And now back to our continuing coverage on the death of Pope Francis. Joining us now is Father Thomas Massaro, a Jesuit priest and theology professor at Fordham University. Good morning, Father.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Father, good morning to you. Thank you for being with us. Let me ask you about Pope Francis's legacy, in your opinion.
Oh, well, he's a very influential pope, having served for 12 years. That's not such a long time, I suspect, but it really has changed the course of the way the Roman Catholic Church relates to the outside world. And I think the deepest memory people will have is that this is a good, approachable pope, one that people felt close to elderly and kids. And I think it really put a human face on the papacy.
And Father, he began his papacy with a simple act, asking for the blessing of the people, and to end his life with that final act, that surprise appearance through St. Peter's Square. How significant will that be?
The fact that the Pope almost always at the beginning, the end, and every day in between asked for people's prayers and their own blessings, you're right. That's a sign of his humility, and that, I think, is the message he wanted to send, a message of mercy, of humility, of caring for the poor and the marginalized, like refugees. I think that's going to leave an indelible impact on how people view the papacy in the future.
Let me ask you personally, how you, playing along the lines of what you just talked about, the fact that he did care so much for migrants and the marginalized, the poor, prisoners, etc., the fact that that was at the forefront of his papacy and the world got an opportunity to see his actions, not just his words.
Yes, he talked a lot about mercy, and that's just a nice word on a page of a theology book, unless a pope enacts mercy. He was on over 40 international trips, and on the itinerary of every one of those that I know of, he made time for the lowly, the poor. When he came to New York, he visited a church, Our Lady of Queen of Angels, in Harlem, East Harlem, one of the poorest zip codes in the whole New York area. He wanted to seek out the people, the little kids in this case who were in the school there, and my mother went to that school when it was Italian Harlem back in the 1940s. So he always made his itineraries around the needy people, and especially in refugee camps.
There were so many moments to see his beautiful smile as he greeted the faithful. Can you tell us, Father, what happens in the next few days?
Yes, so for the next 7 or 8 days, there'll be a time of mourning, and it will culminate in the funeral. A papal funeral in the past has been a very ornate, elaborate, stylized liturgy. About 2 years ago, he published a document where he simplified the funeral rituals. Even his coffin will be a fairly simple, by papal standards, coffin with just one zinc lining, not 3 like the previous popes. And he'll be buried in I wouldn't say it's a small church, but Santa Maria Maggiore, St. Mary Major, about 2 miles from the Vatican, whereas most recent popes have been buried in the vault of St. Peter's, the basilica at the center of the Vatican. So simple, ties to the people. You'll be able to access his tomb much more easily than having to go down. So that's the first stage, a mourning, funeral, and then about 3 weeks from now, the cardinals from all over the world, there's 139 cardinals with voting privileges because they're under the age of 80. They will gather in a conclave. If you've seen the movie Conclave that came out last year, yeah, it was pretty accurate on the details. The cardinals are locked inside, almost sequestered in the Vatican there at the Sistine Chapel, and they do have rounds of voting. It will take multiple rounds. You have to get 2/3 majority, and Pope Francis was elected on the 5th round back in 2013. So I expect multiple rounds of voting, and again, that's about 3 weeks from now.
So, Father, let me ask you this. With that being said, as far as the next pope, not to project too far in advance into the future, do you think the Catholic Church, they go with a pope similar to the teachings of Pope Francis, or do you sense that there may be a change in the offing?
That is a question that theologians talk about all the time. Does Pope A mean that you're going to follow him with a Pope B who's similar or different? So you can be the judge of whether our progression from Paul VI, who died in 1978, to John Paul II, who served until 2005, a 27-year papacy, to Pope Benedict, and now to Pope Francis. I'll let you judge whether they were similar or different. I suspect that Pope Francis has made the papacy, he's remade it in a sense, reformed it, reshaped it, to be more accessible, more of a spiritual leader and less of a doctrinal or even political leader. And I think that the next papacy may look quite a bit like a Pope Francis. And here's the other thing. He's the first non-European pope, he's an Argentinian, right? For at least 400 years, or maybe 1,000 years. So it has opened up the way for us to have a pope from, you name the continent. He was from South America. We could have an Asian, an African, hey, maybe even a North American. We have 7 USA cardinals.
Father, thank you for taking some time for us this morning. We greatly appreciate it.
And up next, reaction pouring in this morning after Pope Francis's passing.
A look now at the Vatican as our breaking news coverage this morning continues. As the world remembers Pope Francis this morning, he had a special relationship with New York. He visited here 10 years ago. Christine Johnson has that story.
As the pontiff stepped off his plane that late September day, he was greeted by crowds of faithful. The atmosphere was simply joyous.
It's pretty extraordinary right now. He's moving toward the crowd, and his face is absolutely beaming.
CBS 2's Dick Brennan was there, and he spoke to a 12-year-old girl who was blessed by Francis.
I came here because I wanted to meet the Pope because I believe in a miracle.
And you saw him. What was that like?
It was the most precious moment of my life.
Julia Bruzzese had lost the use of her legs. Doctors suspected Lyme disease, but were unable to confirm it until days after her meeting with the Pope.
For the first time since I got ill, they saw Lyme disease activity in my blood. This just shows to me that a miracle can happen if you believe.
As the Pope made his way to St. Patrick's Cathedral, I was on Fifth Avenue as the feeling of jubilation cascaded through the crowd.
Oh, this is so exciting, and the wave of the cheering gets closer and closer.
That night, a 17-year-old girl had a surprise encounter with Pope Francis at St. Patrick's Cathedral before the service. Stephanie Gabad, who has spina bifida, says the Pope gave her a hug and a kiss and a blessing.
What did he say to you?
He said something to me in Spanish, but I couldn't quite understand what he was saying.
And what did you say to him?
Bendiciones, Papa, that means bless you.
The Pope took a serious tone during his homily. He addressed church sex abuse scandals and tragedies around the world. He cautioned against temptation and spoke of sacrifice, grace, and humility.
Gratitude and hard work. These are two pillars of the spiritual life which I have wanted to share with you this evening.
The Pope had high praise for nuns and other women across the globe.
What would the church be without you? Women of strength, fighters. To you, religious women, sisters and mothers of this people, I wish to say thank you.
On his second day in the city, the Pope addressed the largest gathering of world leaders ever at the United Nations. Francis asked those in attendance to spread equality and dignity from those in power to the excluded. After speaking at the UN, the Pope headed down to Ground Zero for an interfaith service, and he would reflect on how he was moved by the experience.
That place which speaks so powerfully of the mystery of evil. Yet we know with certainty that evil never has the last word.
He then visited Our Lady Queen of Angels School in East Harlem, where he received an exuberant welcome.
I was like, oh my gosh, he's here. I'm so excited. I'm so nervous.
From there, he went to Central Park for a special procession. The outpouring of love and support for the pontiff was reflected in the crowd of close to 80,000 lined up to see him. So many expressed their great faith in him.
He is the savior of the Catholic Church.
He's going to bring us all back to our faith and make us all one in this universe.
The Pope ended the day at Madison Square Garden celebrating Mass, joined by as many as 20,000 faithful. Emotions were deeply felt as he gave his blessings. The crowd was moved to rise to their feet as his procession approached the stage. As the Pope spoke, he drew a parallel between the garden and the city itself.
In this place, which represents both the variety and the common interests of so many different people, we have listened to the words, "The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light."
Such an incredible visit from Washington to New York to Philadelphia, but we had the honor of covering that, especially down at Ground Zero when he made his appearance down there, and then the parades throughout the city, Madison Square Garden. It was a special time. Can't believe it was 10 years ago.
I know, and when we heard he was beaming, he really was, as were so many who were gathered to see him.
Special time. We'll be right back with our continuing coverage on Pope Francis's passing.
His impact on the world as we remember his life and legacy throughout the morning. If you're just joining us, Pope Francis has died at the age of 88, one day after he made a surprise appearance to bless thousands of people in St. Peter's Square on Easter Sunday. Coverage continues next on CBS Mornings with more on his life and legacy and what is next for the Catholic Church.
And we'll have more team coverage coming up on Pope Francis's passing. Thank you so much for watching this morning. I'm Chris Raggi.
And I'm Mary Calvi.